Recently, Europeans have been regretting their respective governments allowing unrestricted immigration from Muslim nations. Crime rates have skyrocketed, and many feel that their nations are being invaded. But Europeans have suffered invasions by Muslims for over 1,800 years, beginning with the Moors invading Spain and Sicily in the early 8th century, pushing into France until defeated in that same century by Charles Martel in 732. The Turkish Muslims finally eradicated the Byzantine Empire by capturing Constantinople in 1453. They invaded Central Europe and laid siege to Budapest in the 16th century, occupied the Balkans, and so on. But there was one last roll of the dice for the Ottomans, and it ended Islamic expansion, at least until now. What was the Siege of Vienna? How did it start? Who was involved? What was the end result? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. The Ottoman Empire, under the leadership of Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, sought to expand deeper into Europe. Vienna, the capital of the Habsburg monarchy, stood as the gate to Central and Western Europe. The Ottomans had tried this before, most notably in 1529 when Suleiman the Magnificent failed to take the city. But in 1683 the timing looked more favorable. Mustafa Pasha knew that the Habsburgs were bogged down suppressing revolts and Muslim incursions in Hungary, and their forces were stretched thin. Also of importance, in 1679 bubonic plague had been raging in Vienna, reducing and weakening the population. The leader of the Hungarian Calvinists, Imre Tkoli, an Ottoman vassal who was called the King of Upper Hungary, detested the Catholics and the Habsburgs, and knowing these facts, he appealed to Kara Mustafa to attack the Habsburg capital. Armed with this knowledge, the Ottoman army had built up strength and political momentum under Sultan Mehmed IV, who approved the campaign, sensing success. Until this time, a state of peace had existed for 20 years between the Holy Roman Empire and the Ottoman Empire, because of the Peace of Vasvar. Sultan Mehmed IV was willing to violate that to expand his empire. The plan seemed simple enough. Kara Mustafa aimed to deliver a knockout blow, capture Vienna, break the Habsburgs, and open the road to Rome and Western Europe. Taking Vienna had long been a strategic aspiration of the Ottoman Empire due to the control the city had over the Danube River and the overland route trades to Germany and the Eastern Mediterranean. It was also the symbolic capital of the Habsburg Empire. On July 14, 1683, Kara Mustafa led an army of 150,000 to 170,000 men, including 25,529 janissaries, 3,045 weaponeers, 4,000 gunners, 50,000 Tatars, 10,000 Wallachians, and thousands of mercenaries across Eastern Europe. His objective was total domination, not just looting, but a permanent occupation of Vienna to expand the caliphate in the plan to extinguish Christianity in Europe. They had stormed across southeastern Europe through the Balkans, gathering slaves and soldiers for their force from Belgrade to Budapest, killing, burning, and destroying all in their path. Word had spread that the massive Ottoman force was headed towards Austria, which allowed time for the Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I to escape Vienna and begin rallying support. His petition was well received, and a relief coalition formed under the Holy League, including various Christian kingdoms, who set aside their personal differences and mobilized their own forces to confront the mutual threat. Even Pope Innocent XI tried unsuccessfully to convince King Louis XIV of France to aid Leopold against the Ottomans, but the French king was not interested, and then the Pope appealed to the Polish king. However, Duke Charles V of Lorraine broke with his king to join the fight, bringing 20,000 men and 3,000 horses, as did Venice. Although the Polish king, King Jan III Sobieski, and the emperor had made a pact of alliance earlier that year, Sobieski was rather reluctant to come to Leopold's and Vienna's aid until Pope Innocent persuaded Charles of Lorraine to join a combined army, along with the electors of Saxony and Bavaria, as well as 30 German princes. All agreed. However, Sobieski wanted assurances that his Polish, Lithuanian, and German soldiers coming to the aid of the Habsburgs were to be compensated, and the sum was agreed to. Once satisfied, the army marched. Sobieski agreed to take command of the relief army. He brought around 27,000 Polish troops, including the feared winged hussars, and see our video on them, to join a total Allied force of about 70 to 80,000 soldiers. This was the first time the Commonwealth and the Holy Roman Empire had cooperated militarily against the Ottomans. During this time of Sobieski's departure, most of Poland would be undefended, and Emir Thokoli would attempt an invasion. However, sensing such a move, Kazimierz Jan Sapieha delayed the march of the Lithuanian army, campaigning in the Hungarian highlands instead, working as a blocking force against the Hungarians, defeating them. And once that threat was over, he arrived in Vienna, but only after it had been relieved and the battle was over. At that time, Vienna was commanded by Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, and the garrison was staffed with only around 15,000 soldiers and 8,700 volunteers with 370 cannons. He refused to capitulate to the Ottomans, who demanded their surrender. This was because only a few days before, von Starhemberg had received news of the mass slaughter at the small town of Perchtoldsdorf, south of Vienna, where the citizens had surrendered the undefended city after having been given a similar choice. The men were killed and the women and children were enslaved. Therefore, being unable to meet the large Ottoman force in battle, the defenders prepared for a long siege until they could be relieved. But the Ottoman strategy was a long game. Rather than storming Vienna immediately, taking casualties, and risking damage to the great city, Kara Mustafa chose to dig in. His engineers started laying mines and placing gunpowder under the walls to blow them down, and digging tunnels under the walls to expedite entry, while also building long lines of trenches toward the walls to protect his soldiers on the advance, as the Viennese had demolished many of the houses around the city walls and cleared the debris, leaving a clear killing field that would expose the Ottomans to their defensive fire if they tried to rush into the city. The outer wooden palisade was over 150 years old and badly deteriorated. The defenders then began driving large tree trunks into the ground to reinforce the walls. This disrupted the Ottoman plan of a quick siege, adding another 3 weeks to the time that it would take to get past the wall. The objective, from the Ottoman standpoint, was to starve the city into surrender while trying to breach under the walls. During early September, 5,000 experienced Ottoman sappers had demolished large portions of the walls between the Berg Bastion, the Lübel Bastion, and the Berg Rabelin, creating gaps 39 feet wide. The Viennese began digging their own tunnels to intercept the placing of enormous amounts of gunpowder in the caverns. The Ottomans finally managed to occupy the Berg penetration and the nearby low wall on September 8th. Anticipating a breach in the city walls proper, the remaining Viennese prepared to fight in the inner city. The Ottomans had the capability to reduce the walls with their 130 large cannons and 19 medium-caliber cannons, compared to the defenders' 370 cannons, but Mustafa failed to use them effectively. The encirclement of the city was working, and fatigue became so common that von Starhemberg ordered any soldier found asleep on watch would be shot. Starvation was setting in, and the people were becoming increasingly desperate. Vienna was in fact on the verge of possibly either being taken or surrendering when, in August, Charles V, Duke of Lorraine, defeated Thokoli at Bissenberg, just 3 miles northwest of Vienna. This was Mustafa's outer perimeter blocking force. With his massive Muslim force, Mustafa believed that no relief force could get through to the beleaguered citizens, and Mustafa wanted Vienna taken intact as a prize. But this delay would prove fatal. As the Ottomans patiently waited for the city to surrender, the Allied Christian force was on the move, such as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth under King Jan III Sobieski. Duke Charles V, now having defeated the Western Muslim force, was closing in. The coalition of Jan Sobieski and Charles V was joined by the Bavarian, Saxon, and Imperial German states, and supporting Habsburg forces returning from Hungary, all regrouping outside the city. But having the numbers to challenge the Muslims, while important, was not enough. There had to be proper communication, tactical operational planning, and precise execution of a battle plan. Mustafa was apparently made aware of the growing Christian army coming to address this threat to the city, but he probably thought that it would take far too long for the warring Christian kingdoms to rally their forces before he took Vienna. He was wrong. On September 6th, the Poles crossed the Danube 19 miles northwest of Vienna at Tulln to unite with imperial troops and the additional forces from Saxony, Bavaria, Baden, and other imperial estates. While Louis XIV of France declined to help his Habsburg rival after having just annexed Alsace, the call was answered by approximately 5,000 Zaporizhian Cossacks led by Semyon Pali, who joined the relief force. 47,000 Germans and Austrians with some 112 guns and 27,000 Poles with 28 guns were closing in. Kara Mustafa had arranged his army in a crescent shape around the city, possibly weighing the option of launching an attack before the enemy arrived, completely unaware that the Christian coalition had in fact already arrived. In fact, they were on the high ground above him. Sobieski discussed his plans with his allies. Their spies had delivered excellent information on the Ottoman army's troop dispositions. Given the fact that the Ottomans were on the lower terrain, he launched a surprise flanking assault from the hills, coordinating with sorties from the city's defenders. The Christian leaders also knew that the Ottoman forces had made serious inroads into the city's defenses and are believed to have come closer to taking Vienna than they were in 1529. There was fighting in the city proper from the Ottoman explosions that broke the walls, and the Ottomans channeled into small avenues, which allowed Ernst Rudiger von Starnberg's small force to establish choke points. The Muslim dead started stacking up, and 10 bombs under the walls had been found and defused. Of interest, the Ottoman army had been reduced to 90,000 soldiers by August 12th. Ottoman captives admitted that casualties were reaching 20,000 by the end of August. An Ottoman account captured after the battle recorded the number of casualties as 48,544 until September 10th. Those lost included 10,000 Janissaries, 14,000 Sipahi elite heavy cavalry, 16,000 diggers, 6,000 engineers, and 2,000 Tatars, totaling 48,544 deaths. In addition, mass desertions, upwards of 25% of the Ottoman force, and disease further reduced the Ottoman army even before the major battle. The Polish-Lithuanian infantry marched in rank and file towards the Ottoman infantry, which outnumbered them 2-1, and the Ottomans took the bait. Those fighting in the city were now isolated and alone and dying in the process. Knowing they had numerical superiority, the Muslims outside the city charged. This started the climactic battle which took place on the Kahlenberg Heights outside Vienna on September 12, 1683. At 4 a.m. on September 12th, the Ottoman army attacked. At 3:30 p.m., after all these hours of fighting, the Germans renewed their push towards the center on the left flank, making slow progress, tying up the main Ottoman force. Then, after 15 hours of primarily infantry fighting led by the Duke of Lorraine, Sobieski then unleashed the largest cavalry charge in history, sending 18,000 heavy cavalry, including over 3,000 Polish winged hussars. The heavy cavalry rode thundering downhill, led by Sobieski, into the Ottoman lines, which had already buckled under the infantry attacks. The Austrians attacked from the north, the Germans from the south and west. Then the city's defenders came out from the gates and joined in the fight. The Ottoman army collapsed rapidly under the combined pressure. Kara Mustafa fled, leaving behind his camp treasury and massive supplies. Mustafa Pasha's red tent was blown up, but he escaped while thousands of members of his routed army were slaughtered or taken prisoner. So much materiel was left behind, it took the victorious troops and the Viennese population a week to collect all the booty abandoned in the Ottoman camp. Upon his return, Kara Mustafa Pasha was executed by order of the Sultan for his failure and hesitation. On December 25th, Kara Mustafa Pasha was executed in Belgrade by strangulation with a silk rope pulled by several men on each end. The Siege of Vienna became a symbolic turning point in the centuries-long conflict between Islam and Christianity in Europe. The victory helped solidify the Habsburgs' dominance in Central Europe. The failed siege marked the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's slow retreat from Central Europe. As a result, the Holy League gained momentum, leading to the Great Turkish War of 1683 to 1699, ending with the Treaty of Karlowitz, which stripped the Ottomans of most of Hungary and marked a shift in the European balance of power. But the war was not over after Vienna, because the Ottomans had kidnapped 57,220 people who were taken away as slaves during the Ottoman pillage of the Austrian and Hungarian border zone in 1683 during the ride to Vienna. The known numbers were 6,000 men, 11,215 married women, 14,922 unmarried women under the age of 26, of which 204 were noble women, and 26,093 children. During those 16 years following the battle, the Austrian Habsburgs would gradually conquer southern Hungary and Transylvania, clearing them of Ottoman forces, establishing the later Austro-Hungarian Empire. King Jan III Sobieski became a European hero and called the savior of Christendom, and his winged hussars earned near-mythic status. It also proved to the Europeans which Christian kingdoms could be counted upon in such a dire circumstance, and those who could not. Sobieski described the atmosphere in a letter to his wife a few days after the battle, and this letter has been preserved. He states, "Ours are treasures unheard of, tents, sheep, cattle, and no small number of camels. It is a victory as nobody ever knew before. The enemy now completely ruined, everything lost for them. They must run for their sheer lives. General Starnberg hugged and kissed me and called me his savior." One unexpected benefit of the battle was the discovery of coffee in the treasures that were recovered, which is often believed to have been the genesis of Vienna's cafe culture. So add that to the list of unexpected consequences. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.